Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to another exciting episode of Psychology Talks. And I'm your host, Amreen Nadeem. And today we're going to discuss a very uh, in topic these days because lots of people are talking about AI and artificial intelligence that is going to overtake human intelligence. So today we're going to discuss that what is the differentiation between these two intelligence and how we can work closely with AI and with human intelligence, and especially in this era, that what we can do to enhance our capacities by using AI. And I'm so honored to be joined by Ben Perreau. He's the founder of Parafoil, a company dedicated to building leadership intelligence using cognitive science and AI. Ben has spent years helping leaders at startups, scale ups, and Fortune 500 companies navigate growth, transformation, and complex decision making. His experience spans product strategy, organizational development, and culture design, giving him a unique perspective on what AI can do and what it cannot. So, anyways, thank you so much for joining us, Ben. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your second name, Ben Peru. I think I pronounced it correctly, right?
Yeah, honored to be here, Ambreen, and you pronounced it perfectly. Ben Perreau, that's me. Yeah, thank you so
Okay,
much for
thank
doing
you.
that.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to have you with us today. I was looking forward to this episode because, as I told you, that like my PhD dissertation is also closely linked to this topic. So I was looking forward to having this discussion with you today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really grateful to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I gave a very brief introduction about you, but tell us a bit about yourself, that how you started your journey and what
Mm.
struggles you face.
Yeah, I started my career as a journalist of all things. And so I was working as a journalist in London many years ago, and quickly realized that I was probably a better product manager and a businessman than I was a journalist, although I managed to work at lots of places, including the BBC and Sky, and really start to understand the truth behind stories. And I guess in learning how to go and find the truth behind stories, it helped me to kind of set myself up to become a product manager. And so spent a bunch of years product managing inside of large corporates, multinational corporates, and also small startups. Started a couple of companies, and then spent about 8 years working for a leadership development firm that was started by early Apple employees. So I guess you
Mhm.
would call them Steve Jobs' personal staff in the 80s and 90s, and was lucky enough to work with that group of people alongside leadership teams inside of Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. And so I really got to experience what does leadership look like at that level, really starting to understand how leaders who have been really successful approach their work and what makes them tick. And that led me to a better understanding of how organizations work, but also it led me to understand more about where the challenges are faced inside companies increasingly. And I started to realize that, I kept seeing great individual contributors getting promoted into management roles at the bottom of the pyramid, if you like, their first management roles. And then they were left to learn about leadership through trial and error. And so management teams were getting leaner and spans are getting wider. And so the cost of weak leadership went up. And so that was where I started to think about the possibility of building Parafoil. And so that's what we're doing now. We're building Parafoil, which is designed to give managers private in-work feedback, next step guidance, so that they improve without more training or meetings.
Wow, sounds very interesting. I think this is the area where there's a gap, the connecting leadership with the like AI and management. So tell us a bit more about it, that how you manage this connection and how like you are providing the solution to the leaders, especially under this Parafoil company and leadership platform.
Yeah, of course. So in the early days of leadership development, we had what I would call generation one products. And most of those generation products are coaching, training, important interventions that help you improve as a leader, but they take you away from your work. And they often happen in person. Sometimes they're online. There are online coaching marketplaces, those kinds of things. But that generation one product was a great way to be able to build a better understanding of how to lead, but it took you away from your work, and it wasn't necessarily very personalized to you. Sometimes you were getting sort of quite generic content. And then sort of generation two products started to get created, like chatbots. So there's a lot of chatbots and AI. I think we're going to see that those become useful, but not necessarily the one size fits all that everybody was hoping they were going to be. And so those generation 2 chatbots were really important. With Parafoil, we're building what we believe is a generation 3 product. So in the latest generation, we have an app that runs on your desktop, and it analyzes how you lead in the minute, day to day, all of the leadership interactions you have. We also have a mobile app, and so you can use it in room, in person, or you can use it remotely. And then after every interaction with anyone of your team, you receive an alert that says, we've analyzed how you were leading in that moment. Here's some advice and tips for how you might do it better next time. And so it allows you to learn how to lead using AI in the moment without taking you away from your job, and just giving you those kind of moments of praxis where you can say, I'm putting this behavioral change into motion in my next meeting. So actually, you can start to see advancement in days and weeks rather than months and years. And so it just makes it much faster. You shorten the reps, and you can do a lot more work to try and improve how you lead in less time.
Wow, that's amazing. But how does it actually capture all the data right at the moment? Because the first thing is, especially, I think the lag happens when people need to actually enter the, plug in the data and then analyze it. But how does it do this without having the delay?
Yeah. So we give managers a private, trustworthy way for them to be able to capture the content, the conversations that they want to. And so Parafoil is a completely private tool. It's not organizational surveillance. It's not one of these tools where the HR team and the C-suite can spy on their managers. Managers employ Parafoil. They install it on their desktop, and then they select which of their meetings and interactions they want it to analyze. So let's say if I was working for you, Ambreen, then you would say, I want to nominate all of my interactions with Ben as in areas of interaction where I want to have them analyzed. And then you would obviously seek consent so that we could have that conversation, knowing that I was being analyzed by Parafoil. And then Parafoil leaps into action whenever we've got a one-to-one or a group meeting coming up. And then we analyze that meeting for you. So you don't have to manage collecting the conversation. You don't have to manage handling the conversation, but you get full control. You can delete it. You can pause, play. You can do all the things you want to do to control how that information gets processed and when. So we just remove that delay from you being able to, from you having to spend time working to go and do those things, because we saw that some leaders were uploading their conversations into LLMs to try and get feedback on how they were doing. And so this is a much faster way of doing that. We've also fine-tuned the AI to be specifically dedicated to leadership development. And so the AI we're using is the only fine-tuned AI that's dedicated to leadership development, leadership intelligence, and really getting better at your leadership at work. And so we think the results are better than you would get from a general purpose AI.
Yeah, that sounds really fascinating, that how it can actually accumulate all the data at the right time and, and give you the analysis. But here's I'm just thinking that how it can access or how it can analyze the human behavior, because leadership is closely linked with psychology, human cognition, and all those factors behind this. Like maybe, for example, in some interaction, a leader might have some bad day, or maybe something went wrong in their lives and that might affect them. So how does these kind of things it tackles?
Yeah. Our goal is to gather more longitudinal data from managers. And so in doing that, we generate more context for an LLM. And so Parafoil is a combination of a psycholinguistic and cognitive model and a large language model that work together in tandem to be able to understand what's really going on in the conversation. So we can do more than just a regular LLM. We can also do more than a regular kind of traditional machine learning scientific model could, by putting those two things together and being able to use the right mode in the right moment. So as you said, individuals have bad days. Sometimes we're dealing with something that's going on in our personal lives. Sometimes we're dealing with something that's going on in our work lives. But there's always a backdrop of complexity that happens with human beings. That's why, human beings at work are both challenging but also amazing, in that we get this kind of diversity of experiences, thoughts, backgrounds. Those all start to shape somebody's individual judgment in a moment. And so actually, we believe that having humans in the loop is not just important, but it's essential to be able to create good products. And so
Yeah.
Parafoil, the way we can get closer to that is by having a better longitudinal understanding of what's going on, so that we can start to shape the experience on the basis of that individual's experience themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's really fascinating to me that how it can do this. Now, since you have actually both, you have access to both, I would say, kind of intelligence, like human intelligence and artificial intelligence. So it leads me to the question that how do you define or how do you differentiate between these two intelligences, like human intelligence or an artificial intelligence?
Yeah. AI is really becoming very good at pattern inference from data. So if we
Mm-hmm.
look at data, how do we understand patterns that happen over a long time? You want to look at linguistic patterns that happen. Do I use collective pronouns or individualistic ones? Do I consistently use one word often or one word less often? What are the things that I reveal in terms of the conversational data and also the work that I do that say more about me? And AI is really good at understanding what those patterns are. It's also really good at surfacing themes. It's also really good at saying, hey, listen, these are some themes that I'm seeing. I'm synthesizing these ideas to be able to say, I think these are things that you might do. It's really good at summaries, options, drafts, brainstorming, consistency. It's really good at those things. What it really isn't very good at is sense making in context. What does it look like to generate more sense out of the context of the work? What are the values that I'm bringing to the work? Those are deeply human things. What are the relationships that we have? So understanding the flavor of the relationship and understanding that the nature of the relationship is important, but AI doesn't do a good job at really understanding the depth and complexity of that relationship. Trade-offs, what trade-offs might we make as a result of choosing A versus B? AI can surface those ideas, but isn't so good at being able to say, these are the trade-offs here and there. And then finally, responsibility, which I think is the most important
Yeah.
one. If you and I are in a workplace and we've got a big decision to go and make, AI won't necessarily weight the level of that responsibility with as much emotional understanding as maybe it could do. And so my belief is that you need humans in the loop for those things. So it's okay to reduce admin and surface themes and prep decisions. You can even spot the drift over time with leadership development. But I think accountability and power dynamics, values, real world context is going to remain in the domain of the human being for a long, long time. And so I think AI expands the options, humans own
Mhm.
decisions.
Yes, I love that definition that you gave. It's basically, I think, yes, it can simulate the experience, but actually, we are the ones who actually experience and actually we understand the depth of the experience that what exactly it is all about. So it's all about, like, I think, as you said, that values and understanding that what exactly it is all about, because it can only, I mean, just run the algorithms and simulate and do all those, like, thinking, or I would say this, all the programming that done, these patterns done behind the scene, and it can give us some result. But at the end of the day, it is our decision making I would say the capability that would help us. But it also leads me to the question that, especially the ethics that involved with using AI. Like, nowadays it it gives the access to everything, like we can do anything and everything, and then it has some kind of a fine line between, going or crossing that boundary of ethics and all these responsibilities that we have as humans. So what do you think that, how we can actually counter this, or maintain these ethical values, especially in this era?
Yeah, the advent of transcript collection, note taking apps, recorder apps, and just artificial intelligence in general is generating so much more opportunity for surveillance risk in workplaces. And so that's one area that I feel particularly passionate about. Um, you know, there are tools being built that are creating more surveillance opportunity for organizations in workplaces. But increasingly, I think there's a dialogue being built around what privacy looks like in the
Yeah.
AI world. And so we are having to build a better understanding. And honestly, our data literacy needs to go up
Yeah.
in order to
Yeah.
be able to understand what's happening in the workplace. And so, with 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 AI, we're very deliberate about private development with Parafoil. We believe leaders need a space to improve without creating a surveillance dynamic. And so we've built a tool for leaders, and then there's an HR roll up or a C-suite roll up, which is obfuscated empirical data only, nothing individualized, so that you can't identify the individuals. The other thing I think that really concerns me with AI is bias and discrimination risk in decisions.
Yeah.
It's changing. AI just amplifies some of the bias and discrimination challenges we already have. It doesn't eliminate them. And I think for a while
Yeah.
we were of the belief that it was going to eliminate them. We started to realize all of these strange areas where, ultimately they've been trained on human data. And so they just amplify and scale some of the bias and discrimination challenges we've had. I think the third area of three, where there are potential for ethical challenges and misuse of AI, are around accountability gaps. So when
Yeah.
leaders outsource their responsibility to tools, to what extent are leaders still taking accountability for the decisions they make? And AI absolves some people of making those choices. And I think it becomes even more incumbent on us to have a stronger ethical compass for what we believe is the right choice that we're making. After all, we're paid for our expertise in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so we have to use our expertise to its benefit. Otherwise, we're just using the sort of what I call the median intelligence that AI is creating for all of us, rather than the super intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And in fact, I was actually reading a book by Kathy O'Neill, this by Maths Destruction. I think Destruction, uh, Maths Destruction, or something like this, by Kathy O'Neill. And she said the right things, like these algorithms can actually create more biases, and if we don't, as humans, have right ethical values and prevent them, or don't try to limit the areas that where these biases can amplify. So I think this is where our role becomes more important. But again, at this moment, it is now just this AI is in the hand of everyone. So we know that maybe there are some people who are actually following the ethical values, but there are large number of people who actually do not care about these values, and they are easily they want to see their benefit. So do you think there any like governance, or is there any resource or a source who is looking after these kind of, or implementing these ethical values, or is there any body who's actually looking after these kind of things, which can be prevented by the misuse of AI?
Yeah, over the course of the last 10 years, information security protocols have started to leap up, and people are getting sort of SOC 2 and ISO approved for information security. And I see organizations who are also thinking about data ethics and organizational and AI ethics from an organizational perspective. And so I think increasingly we will see accreditations, governance, third party, stamps of approval that we can use to go and say, hey, listen, we conform to a certain quality and standard of ethics in terms of how we approach artificial intelligence. It's a really interesting time in terms of how we think about the advent of AI. I think of most AI as not much more than the next wave of automation. But
Mm-hmm.
what's different about this wave of automation is it comes with inference and
Mm-hmm.
its own sense of judgment and some of these things. And so, to your point, we have to be very careful how we implement AI in the workplace so that we do it in a way that is responsible, and we're really thinking about how it's going to be deployed, because what we don't want at Parafoil is for this to become another performance management tool. That's not what it is. it's a way for you to go and manage your own performance as a leader. But that's
Yeah.
very different to, HR teams saying, hey, listen, these are the top 10 people in terms of performers. We're going to go and make changes as a result of that. There are ways to go and assess that stuff. I think it should be more based on business outcomes. So I think there are tools that are out there that are being used to generate a greater sense of whether or not this product you're using is an ethical or not so ethical tool to use.
Wow, that's really that's really refreshing to know that there are still some tools who are actually looking after, or that there are ethical uses of AI or not, because it's like it seems sometimes if you can't control, then it's out of the hand, and if it goes out of the hand, then it can create only chaos. So at the moment, maybe we're just seeing that, okay, we are in control, we can do a lot of automation and everything, but at the end, if we don't use it ethically and responsibly, then it can create chaos. So yeah, it's dangerous also.
Yeah, it is dangerous, and I think for some people it is creating chaotic environments, chaotic workplaces. We've seen AI deployed in some management contexts, not with Parafoil, but using other tools, where it's creating inconsistency for people as well, because they think they're dealing with their own human manager. Then all of a sudden, this tool comes in that hasn't got the right context, hasn't got the depth of context or the breadth, and it's sort of starting to shape the manager direct report relationship. And all of a sudden, the direct report, as a good manager, really being consistent for your team is the most basic thing you can do. As in, be consistent so that they understand how you make decisions, what's important to you, what are your values, those kinds of things. We've seen that shift for some people, so that they are managing via the LLM, managing via the chatbot, and I think that that starts to create choppiness, I think, for the relationship, and it's not a good experience for either party in the end.
Yeah, that's very true. So I was just like going listening to some podcasts and some like people, and they've been like not very positive. I mean, especially like these even tech leaders, they have been actually saying that they can't predict that what's going to happen, because they said that the speed of change has been accelerated so much, and they don't know that what's going to happen. It is for the first time in the history that we are entering into the era where we can't predict anything, because even like when the internet came, of course people were saying that, oh, something has changed, and it was a big change happening, but people were quite optimist. But even at some level, like Yuval Harari and other people who are also saying that, at this moment, they can't predict anything that what's going to happen. So what's your view on that what's going to happen in the future? Are we still having, we are optimistic, or there's a danger ahead?
I will caveat this section of our conversation by saying, at the moment, a lot of technologists have a big voice in the conversation. And as technologists, we tend to be either extremely utopian, because we believe that technology is the answer, because we've opted in with our lives, or we tend to be extremely doomy, because we genuinely believe that technology is immensely powerful, because we have that bias. And so therefore, we tend to occupy the sort of polarities of the conversation. I will say my personal opinion is, we generally overestimate what's possible in the 2-year time horizon and underestimate what's going to happen in the 10-year time horizon. I think it was Bill Gates who said that. I believe that's broadly true, in that we're all trying to predict and understand what's going on, but with all of the sort of future predictions, the only thing we really know is that we're invariably wrong about what we try to predict and forecast about how things are going to go. I think if we look out in the sort of 1 to 2 year time horizon, where the optics are a little clearer, I think we can see, the sort of language models that we've been using have started to settle a little bit. And so generation change is a little bit smaller between one generation to the next. So we're starting to see a stabilization in terms of capability. And they're starting to look at multimodal moments. So when do we use deterministic versus probabilistic compute methods? Those I think are happening. So I agree that it's difficult for us to predict what's going to go on over the sort of 10-year time horizon. I do feel that this is the first time that we've ever not been able to predict what's happening. I think anybody who tells you they could predict what was happening 10 years from now, 10 years ago, is quite frankly not right. Let's just say that. So my belief is it's a complex time where we don't know what's going to happen. I think there's a lot of anxiety about shifts in the workforce. There will be job changes as a result of this. Is it going to turn out to be this sort of grandiose 40% mass unemployment predictions that we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago? I don't think so. I think there are some inevitable shifts, but with most of them, it's about how you think about the narrative and the time frame you're thinking about. You know, we have seen shifts in the way that content and movies get made. That's happening. But a lot of that is to do with the inevitable shifts that needed to happen in those industries anyway. So I think there's maybe a little bit of sobriety required as we think about how we're approaching some of these questions, and recognizing that a lot of the people with the loudest voice are the people who have the loudest voice because they want to be heard.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That I love that the way you explain that. It's something that, you know, we need to be open-minded with whatever is ahead. So instead, like, you know, being like worried about or being anxious about that, you know, it's going to take over all those our jobs and everything. So we need to be open, and we need to think, like, I think, as a working with AI as assistant instead of not as a replacement. So like it can work with us, and we can utilize them to, and we can use them to enhance our capability. So I think that's how we can have this open-mindedness toward AI. And but I was just also thinking that it has changed a lot, and there are lots of, if you say that, like, thinking, it's kind of a thinking model, right? It can create some intelligence. What do you think, that how much it can be done to replicate the human thinking? Do you think it can be achieved by artificial intelligence, or still it's very it's long distant at this moment?
Yeah. You know, you were talking about using AI as an assistant before this. I felt like it was a natural lead into this conversation about intelligence. You know, that there was a time before finance people had access to Microsoft Excel and the spreadsheet, and most of them don't like to think about it because the amount of manual math that was happening in that context was a lot, and yet everyone was working in the finance field long hours back then, and they work long hours now because it's one of those industries that's culturally the way it works. But the automation now is completely different. So there are all these tools like the spreadsheet have arrived and changed the way we work, and there's such significant differences that the before and after is profound. The before and after for the spreadsheet in the in finance terms is pretty profound. Now we're in the world of AI, which is, you know, is changing how a lot of people work. And if it isn't changing how people work, then they should be thinking about how it's going to change how they work. I think about this new set of AI that we've sort of brought into the work recently as evidence of consciousness. As not evidence of consciousness. Sorry, it's not. There's no evidence that the AI is actually awake or alive. I treat it as a metaphor. It's a metaphor for having a personality, for having a consciousness. I don't see it as evidence of any consciousness or living being in any way. You know, LLMs reflect aggregated cultural patterns from training data, and they surface them in a way that appears to be like a human interaction, but it's not. And so I don't treat it like it is alive. And I think that's the danger. If you start to treat the chatbot like it's like it's a human being, that's when you
Yeah.
start to spiral into the concerning place, you know.
Yeah, and we've seen this, by the way, it's happening even around the globe that, a lot of people are even having this kind of like romantic relationship, or even like people, especially, this was very heartbreaking that a teenage boy actually committed suicide because it was
Oh,
became the friends kind of with AI, and it led him to the different direction. But I think these are the dangers that where you're absolutely right that we don't need to take AI as a human being because it
mm,
doesn't have a consciousness, because it doesn't know that the values are what is the experience like. So they can come up with some kind of responses which we may like, but it's not exactly at the end of the day we need to be in control instead of like giving them the responsibility of running the show. So I think that's how where we need to be, create a difference between AI and human intelligence, right?
yeah, in some ways, I think about chatbots in particular as the ultimate bias machine. When we had Web 1, we had a lot of content that was getting deployed en masse. It was sort of transmitted broadcast content, and
Mm-hmm.
then Web 2 was about personalized content. So I was seeing content that was most interesting to me, and I was seeing
Yeah.
friends' content, but also the stuff I was receiving via Instagram and my Facebook feed and
Mm-hmm.
via all those places was very targeted at me because the algorithm was driving that stuff.
Yeah.
Now we have this almost uncanny chatbot
Mm-hmm.
that will talk to us in a way that is so perfectly targeted at our own personality because it's
Yeah.
being trained and driven by all of our interactions, that
Mm-hmm.
it's entirely possible that we're going to all find ourselves having to really extricate ourselves from the potential to fall into our own confirmation bias as we have conversations with these tools. And I know there is work being done at the model development houses to go and investigate how they try and do that. But they're also incentivized on engagement. It's their job to try and drive the highest amount of engagement possible. And so
Yeah.
we, as consumers of AI in one context or another, need to recognize the extent to which it can drive that amount of bias in each one of us as individuals.
Yeah, I think that's the very greatest danger of the AI, that it is that it targets the people, and like they know these people more than they know themselves. So I think that is the major danger, that those who are unaware of these possibilities, or I would just say that they are those who are unaware of themselves, are the easy target, because they will follow what the AI or anyone else is actually guiding them or leading them. And that's what, like, we've seen, as you said, that especially when the Google is, or the Insta is giving you the feed, whatever is in your whatever what you type, or whatever even you think about or even talk about with your friends, you start seeing all those ads and the same kind of feed in your Insta or something. It happens, but the thing is that if the people are not aware of themselves, they're going to go into the tunnel vision, because
Hmm.
their world will be so narrow that they will be seeing what they want to see. That's it.
Mhm.
So that is the danger. I think in the current era, what I feel is that if they are not aware of themselves, if they don't want to open their mind, they will be actually boxed in something where in kind of a prison of their own thoughts, and it would be very much true, and it will be not by them, it will be also done by the AI. So I think that is one great danger by AI and in this time. So, but that leads me to the question that what would you advise to anyone to live in this era, especially
Mm.
in this AI, to to utilize our capacities in the best way, but also to protect themselves from the dangers of AI.
Yeah, great question. You know, A- AI is changing the baseline in terms of access to information and access to ideas.
Yeah.
And so, in a world where knowledge, information, and ideas are completely democratized, and I can come up with 100 new ideas for any kind of brainstorm in any given moment, then we should recognize that the differentiators are going to change a little bit. And this happens with every era of automation. You know, at one point, the person who manned the loom was the person who held the point of differentiation because they had the skill to man the loom, and then the automatic loom came out, and that changed. So I think in this era, taste, judgment, values, those are the things that will continue to differentiate you more in an era of AI. And so how do you develop taste? How do you develop judgment? How do you develop values?
Yeah.
Those things are much more about understanding your own humanity, reading books, reading literature, novels, you know, those things help people understand moral reasoning. That's what's so wonderful about reading in the liberal arts. Developing more sense-making, ethical judgment, how you can prioritize on the basis of what's going on, managing trust and conflict skills. Those are things that and metacognition about bias. I think also we've talked a lot about bias. So those are the things that I think are going to become important in a world, particularly, you know, at work, where wider spans of leadership, more measurement, higher expectations. Leaders who raise the signal to noise ratio are going to be the ones who win. And so my sort of, I guess my takeaway for folks who are thinking about how to use AI most thoughtfully, as well as developing their own taste and differentiated skills, is to use AI to improve the quality of your options, and then take full responsibility yourself for the choice you make. If you can do those two things, I think you will continue to survive and thrive in the AI era.
Yeah, wonderful advice. I think that's much needed to be here today, because lots of people are confused and they don't know what to follow. But this is the time to be more discerning about our human intelligence. That you say that, like, you know, having that arts and passion and values and ethics and all these things make us more human. So I think in this time it is more important to embrace our humanness, and not just trying to compete with AI, because AI can never actually beat us in that way, that to how much it can compute, how much faster it can compute, and all these algorithms that it can run. But what it cannot do is our own, like, creativity, the imagination, and which comes through the liberal art. And I think that's how we can create our differentiation from, like, AI and human intelligence. So I think that's wonderful. I know we can go on and on this topic because it's a vast topic, and it can even every aspect we can discuss, like, for hours, like how it can impact on education, how it can impact on kids, teens, youth, like every area, because this is the time which is, I think, the most interesting, is that, you know, it has affected each and every generation. And it is like those who can actually use it wisely, they can, you know, get benefit. But if you cannot use it, then definitely it can harm you very badly. So yeah, they need to be wise. You need to use it wisely. So anyways, tell us a bit about that, how, if people want to reach out to you, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn under /Perreau, P-E-R-E-A-U, but also you can email the entire Parafoil team, humans@parafoil.co. So if you ever want to email us, it's super easy. The entire team reads those emails, and so we'll promise to read it, and we try and get back to everyone we can. So humans@parafoil.co is the way to get in touch. I would love to hear from folks who have been sort of provoked or inspired by this conversation. Obviously, we'll be making this podcast available, so hopefully folks will have comments, and I'll be watching those too. So I'm excited to kind of keep the thread and the conversation going in that way too.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I've also shared your website and the link to your LinkedIn, but I'll also definitely share the email address. So whoever wants to connect with you, it will be easier to connect through the email. So anyways, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It was very enriching and very insightful. Thank you.
Wonderful. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Ambreen.
Thank you so much. Okay.